It is my pleasure to introduce the 2024 Duncan Derry Award winner, Professor Keiko Hattori. My name is Erin Adlaka, and I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Geology at St. Mary's University in Halifax. As a former graduate student of Keiko's, I can attest that not only has Keiko had an incredible career with an outstanding contributions in mineral deposits research, she has also been a pioneer for women in geoscience, serving as both a role model and mentor to her female students. Keiko's academic career initiated in 1972 when she was the first female student to graduate from the geology major Bachelor of Science program at the University of Tokyo. She quickly followed up this degree with her Master's of Science in Geology in 1974 and a PhD in Geochemistry in 1977. Keiko came to Canada in 1977 as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alberta, where she was a researcher with the International Drilling Project, where she studied volcanic rocks and thermal alteration in Iceland. After another research position at the University of Calgary, Keiko landed an assistant professor position in 1983 at the University of Ottawa, where she was the first female professor of mineral deposits in Canada. Keiko was quickly promoted in 1987 to associate professor and then promoted to the rank of full professor in 1994. Keiko has held numerous positions at the university, including chair of the department and director of the Ottawa Carleton Geoscience Centre, and has served as a visiting professor or researcher at many institutions globally throughout her career, including MIT and La Université Grenoble. Keiko's contributions to geological societies are just too numerous to list, but I will highlight her outstanding work with the Society of Economic Geologists and Royal Society of Canada. Before Keiko retired last year, she was honored by the University of Ottawa with the title of Distinguished University Professor for her many contributions to both scientific research and education. Keiko's research utilizes fieldwork, mineralogy, and geochemistry, including redox-sensitive trace elements and stable isotopes to interpret Earth processes from its mantle to its surface. Her research has set the foundation of how we view the transfer of metals and volatiles between Earth's mantle and crust at subduction zones, and has established our understanding of the geological processes involved in the formation of giant porphyry copper deposits. Her other notable contributions include the role of serpentinates in transferring volatiles from the crust to the mantle, and the timing in which Earth's atmosphere was enriched in oxygen at 2.2 billion years ago, and osmium isotope systematics of the mantle. At the 2025 GACMAC conference in Ottawa, we held a special session to honor Keiko's career and had many participants who were her past and also current students, postdocs, colleagues, and collaborators. Everyone attested not only for Keiko's prowess as a geoscientist, but also for her wonderful personality, her huge energy, and her geniality. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the 2024 Duncan Derry Award winner, Dr. Keiko Hattori.
Thank you, Erin, for your wonderful introduction. First, I will thank the nominating committee of MDD and also my former students for nominating and also writing support letters. Thank you. Today, I am talking about the magma redox conditions that control hydrothermal metal mineralization. I have been working on redox conditions, redox-sensitive elements in the mantle, arc magmas, and also hydrothermal fluids. All these different studies started to provide me a coherent picture for metal mineralization, I think. So today I will talk about two major hydrothermal metal deposits, copper and gold. And to understand how copper and gold may form magmatic mineral deposits, I will briefly describe the property of copper and gold in magmas and fluid, meaning how they may be transported in magma and fluids. For porphyry copper deposits, a relationship between magmas and mineralization is fairly clear because many porphyry copper deposits are hosted by that igneous rocks. But for high-grade epithermal type gold deposits, genetic link has been in a debate because high-grade epithermal type gold deposits form in a very shallow crustal levels. Almost all are less than 500 meter below the surface. So, but today I will convince you that there is a genetic link between magmatism and gold mineralization. And I will describe geological setting to produce such magmas for epithermal gold and also porphyry copper deposit. Many hydrothermal deposits occur along subduction zones. Some are young subduction zones, some are old subduction zones, such as altide. Why subduction zones are important for mineralization, magmatic mineralization? Because subduction introduces water into a mantle, and therefore mantle, subarc mantle is hydrated, and also that produce water-rich hydrated magmas. Water-rich magma is very important for magmatic hydrothermal activity because magmatic fluid can be released with metals. So the water-rich nature is common in any subduction-related magmas, but the magmatic oxidation condition quite vary, depending on what are subducted and what are the condition mantle, and also that affected by what are overlying arc crust. This is the reason. Oxidation conditions of subduction-related magmas are quite vary. This is a logarithmic scale, and this is FMQ oxygen buffer. Most of, like for example, rift-related magmas, like mido-oceanic ridge basalt, have a very consistent oxidation conditions below even FMQ oxygen buffer. On the other hand, subduction-related magma, more than 1,000 times, are different in oxidation conditions. Varying oxidation state of magmas are reflected even in granitic rocks. Granitic rocks commonly contain oxides. For example, magnetite. Magnetite contains ferric iron, meaning it's oxidized parental magma can produce magnetite. For example, look at those northern Chile or central Chile. Almost all granite in this area contain magnetite. On the other hand, for example, Malay Peninsula, well known for tin mineralization but not porphyry copper mineralization, they do not contain much of granite, do not contain magnetite. The variation in subduction-related magmas are also shown reflected by copper production. For example, here, northern and central Chile produce a large amount of copper. Almost all copper is coming from porphyry copper deposit, and the same is the Philippines and Indonesia. Even though, for example, the subducting Philippines sea plate is the same around here, same here. However, for example, very well known subduction zone like Japan and New Zealand do not contain any porphyry copper deposit. However, they are known for high-grade epithermal type gold deposits. So now just look at processes. What are the fundamental processes required to form hydrothermal metal mineralization? It requires extraction of metals as a source and transport of metals to shallow crust by magmas, and transfer of metals from magmas to fluid, and also transport of metals in a fluid. These steps are controlled by oxidation state. And copper and gold show very different behaviors, and this is the reason porphyry copper deposit contain quite abundant sulfide and base metals. On the other hand, high-grade epithermal type gold deposit base metal content is low. So now look at those behavior of sulfur in a different oxidation state. The reason why is that metals are mostly in a sulfides, in a mantle rocks, also crustal rocks. And also the sulfur form complexes in the magmas, and also soluble complexes in a fluid. Therefore, sulfur is quite important in that extraction and transport of metals. So this is a species of sulfur. This is the oxidation state. Almost all sulfur in a reduced conditions, sulfur is 2- conditions in the magma. So meaning is that, for example, mid-oceanic ridge basalt and rift-related magmas contain S2- sulfide, or reduced fluids contain H2S or HS-. On the other hand, sulfur subduction zone related area magmas may contain both sulfide sulfur and sulfate sulfur. So this shows the solubility of sulfur. And reduced sulfur, sulfide does not dissolve much compared to sulfate. However, still at even reduced conditions, sulfide sulfur can be more than 1000 ppm. So that is a bit important. So this is about the boundary. So meaning is again that more is sulfide, but also that the subduction zone related one could be sulfide sulfur or sulfate. So now look at how metals are present in the magmas. Copper forms complexes oxygen and chlorine in the magmas. Meaning is that more oxidized conditions, more copper can be dissolved in magmas. On the other hand, gold forms a complex with a sulfide sulfur and oxygen. And the meaning is that reduced condition, of course, sulfide sulfur is abundant, but oxidized conditions, no sulfide sulfur. Therefore, the solubility of sulfur in a metal shows some kind of peak around the reduced oxidized boundary. And again, that this shows the area where the subduction related magmas are this kind of oxidation conditions. So now, when that magma is saturated water, when the water is released, what happens to the metals? Copper is transferred from oxidized magmas to fluid. As you can see, oxidized condition, copper is more in a fluid compared to copper in a metal. On the other hand, if reduced conditions, copper remains in a metal. Gold forms complexes with reduced sulfur. Therefore, more gold is transferred to fluids from reduced magma. This is their ratios of their gold in a fluid to gold in a melt. As you can see, more gold is transferred, more reduced magmas. On the other hand, oxidized magma, gold is not transferred much to fluid phase. So now, as I already mentioned, copper forms chloride complexes in a magma, but also form chloride complexes in a fluid. So meaning is not affected by redox conditions. More chloride in a magma, meaning is magmatic fluids, contain more chloride, therefore more copper can be fluid. Gold is a bit more complex because gold forms complexes, soluble complexes with reduced sulfur and with HS- and therefore very redox sensitive. Gold sulfur complex are quite high in the more less oxidized conditions. But also gold form chloride complexes. So if chlorine is high, very oxidized conditions, gold can be transported as chloride complex. But the usual conditions, most of that magmatic fluid may contain less than 1 molar of chlorine, meaning is that gold is more efficiently transported in a slightly reduced conditions. This shows even lower temperatures. As you can see, gold HS complex is far more efficient for transporting mechanism. So from these, the understanding of behavior of gold and copper, we can conclude highly oxidized magmas are very good for copper mineralization because can efficiently extract copper or base metals and can transport metals to shallow crust by magma, oxidized magmas. And then those copper can be transferred from magma to magmatic fluids. For gold, slightly reduced magma is preferred because that efficient transport of gold to shallow crust is by magma as sulfide complexes. And also transfer gold to magmatic fluid. Also, this requires sulfide in a fluid. Therefore, and also the even lower temperature, gold form complexes with reduced sulfur. So they are quite different behavior of copper and gold. And now we will look at their supporting evidence in nature. So evidence of oxidized magma for porphyry copper deposits are quite well known. Now porphyry copper related igneous rocks using that the zircon and also that oxide, iron titan oxide. We know those igneous rocks are highly oxidized, almost the extreme end member of subduction related magmas, usually more than FMQ plus 2, meaning it's 100 times more oxidized than FMQ oxygen buffer. And also that oxidized nature of oxidized nature is evident in several of those magma igneous minerals. For example, apatite may contain anhydrite in quartz monzonite in Santa Rita porphyry copper deposit, or also anhydrite was found in a zircon, or barite is found in olivine in that volcanic rocks in that Bingham Canyon deposit. And also that oxidized nature is shown in trace elements in a zircon. Zirconium is a 4 plus cation, and therefore other 4 plus cation can be incorporated easily into a zircon. Meaning is that oxidized magma among rare earth elements, cerium is 4 plus. This 4 plus cerium can be incorporated into zircon. And therefore, when you plot rare earth elements patterns of the rare earth element patterns, you can see that very high peak at cerium. And also that now that many compilations were done for cerium 4 to cerium 3 ratios of the zircon, and many porphyry copper related igneous rocks contain zircon with very high cerium 4. If the ratio is more than say 100, meaning almost all cerium is 4 plus. And also amphibole shows high FO2 conditions. And for example, this is FMQ buffer, and almost all amphibole from many different places show high oxidation conditions, usually FMQ +2 or some are +3. And oxidized magma produce oxidized fluids. Then they produce oxidized minerals such as anhydrite in high temperature, in a potassic zone, potassic alteration zones, or magnetite. And also lower temperature, maybe alunite may precipitate. Alunite must contain sulfate and also hematite. As you can see here, they are very abundant in a porphyry copper deposit. So now let's look at the subduction zone which produce high-grade gold deposit. What are major difference between those copper-rich region and the copper-poor but producing high-grade gold? And as I mentioned already, subducting material here, southern part of Japan and the west, the Philippines, those identical. So now look at the geological setting and the magnetism. So I selected two areas with very well-known geology and age data, Hishikari and McLaughlin, because they are very young. Therefore, we know precisely their plate configuration and that the movement of those plates in that area, or also that faults and age of volcanism. Hishikari is located in the southern part of Japan here. Japan has many quaternary volcanic rocks. However, that below volcanic, those young volcanic rocks, they are basement rocks. Those basement rocks in the southern part of Japan is called Shimanto metasedimentary rocks. This is a Jurassic Cretaceous accretional prism and very long. And this Shimanto metasedimentary rocks is a host for high-grade Hishikari gold deposit. So what had happened is about 5 million years ago, whole that area had a rotation, anti-clockwise rotation, because collision of Izu Peninsula pushed the main part of Japan to the northwestward, and also that the subduction of the extinct ridge, that's also caused more the rotation of this the southern part of Japan. Meaning is this is going northwestward, this is going southward. Meaning is this area become very large extensional regime. Because of that, the very large amount of mafic magmas are produced, and almost all are high magnesium andesite. Some are basaltic rocks. This is a scale of 50 kilometers, and some are 200 meters to 400 meters thick lavas. And as you can see, quite a large distribution of high magnesium andesite. The reason slightly that this area doesn't have is because of later, younger quaternary volcanic rocks is underlying, is present, but below this high magnesium andesite is present. And as you can see, many high-grade epithermal type of gold deposits are coinciding in the area of this high magnesium andesite. And by the way, Hishikari is located here. So when we now look at those strontium and neodymium isotope compositions of magnesium andesite, these magnesium andesite are distinctly different from arc volcanic rocks, present-day arc volcanic rocks, and also very different from Shimanto sedimentary rocks. Of course, Shimanto sedimentary rocks cannot produce partial melt of magnesium andesite, so the isotope data shows this large extension in that area provided upwelling of asthenospheric mantle, and a partial melting of asthenospheric mantle to produce such mafic magmatism. And as you can see that this is strontium 87-86 ratio of adularia in gold veins. And the value is not the same, however, very different from Shimanto sedimentary rocks. As I mentioned, high-grade gold veins are all hosted by these Shimanto sedimentary rocks. That meaning is a very strong contribution of magmas. So this is a very brief but geological history of the Hishikari. Mesozoic, very thick marine sedimentation. And then Miocene time, uplifted. And Pliocene, Pleistocene time, rifting, produce a very large extension regime, and therefore mantle-derived magnesium magmas. And then 1 million years ago, gold mineralization. And very, very similar geological history was recorded in a McLaughlin deposit in California. McLaughlin deposit is located in California. And this was very famous because that they produced a very large dendritic gold. So now look at it. So McLaughlin deposit is located here. As you can see that this is outside of subduction-related volcanic chains, Cascadia volcanoes. For example, very famous Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier are within this Cascadia volcanic zone. This Cascadia volcanic zone is in a response of subduction of oceanic plate, Golden Plate and Juan de Fuca Plate. So just McLaughlin is far outside of this Cascadia volcanic zone. And this area, McLaughlin deposit, is underlain by very thick sedimentary rocks called Franciscan sediments and also valley sediments. Franciscan sediment is that again that accretional prism and rootless, and valley sediment is quark sediments. Because of San Andreas Fault, this is a very large fault, therefore there are several parallel faults, and this parallel faults produced Pura-Parto type rifting, and therefore this rifting allowed mantle-derived mafic volcanism like Sonoma volcanic zones here, and also Clear Lake volcanic rocks. The timing of those volcanic rocks, Clear Lake volcanic rocks, is the same as mineralization at McLaughlin deposit. As I mentioned, this is a huge, again, that magnesium andesite. Again, when you look at those isotope compositions of Clear Lake volcanic rocks, distinctly different from the valley sediments or also Franciscan accretional sediments, distinctly that showing that contribution of asthenospheric mantle. So again, that this is a very brief history. Very thick marine sedimentation in the Cretaceous time around this area in the entire west coast, and the uplifting happened, and the strike slip fault pull apart lifting. That's provided mantle-derived mafic magmatism, forming magnesium andesite. Why magnesium andesite? Because that small assimilation of sediments made andesite field. So then a gold mineralization about 1 million years ago. Many other high-grade epithermal type gold deposits show very similar geological history. For example, here they are Kushiki no Konomai Hauraki gold field in New Zealand, Ganang Ponga, Adatape, Yandong. And the ages are different, and also the amount of gold may be different. They are all underlain by very thick marine sediments. Some are Jurassic, some are even at Devonian, Cambodian. And the area was uplifted to subaerial conditions. And then at rotation, plate rotation, or large strike slip fault, that produced extensional regime. Therefore, mantle-derived mafic volcanic rocks erupted. And like olivine andesite, or some magnesium andesite. And then mineralization is in that contemporaneous with that magmatism. So this shows some picture illustration of that sequence of events. Mantle sedimentation contain marine sediments contain high amount of organic carbon and sulfide, meaning they are very reduced. The underlying mantle is hydrated by prior subduction processes. That meaning is some magma is produced from that mantle is water rich. And then at those, the area is uplifted, and there's those rotation or also the strike slip fault produced some very large extensional regime, and the partial melting happens and producing water rich melt. And then at those magma ascent through those thick marine sediments. Because marine sediment is reduced, there is magma. Some minor even assimilation can cause reduction. Therefore, within the magma, sulfide melt is formed in magma. This sulfide melt can scavenge base metals. Therefore, this magma is low in base metals, but still that mafic magma can still contain sulfide sulfur more than 1000 ppm. So then at those closer to the upper crust, then those magma can separate magmatic fluid. Those magmatic fluid is reduced, and also that because marine sediments is reduced, therefore reduced fluids are capable to reach, for example, arsenic 3+, antimony 3+, or ammonia. This is the reason that many high-grade epithermal type gold deposits are enriched in those elements, including ammonia. And now gold is transferred to fluids, but not much copper or other base metals in this reduced fluid. This is the reason high-grade epithermal type gold deposits do not have many base metals, very low base metal content, and no oxidized alteration phases or main minerals. So in a summary, I showed today porphyry copper and high-grade epithermal type gold deposits show very close links, genetic links with magmatism. But the copper and gold have a very different ways for transportation in magmas and fluids. This is the reason that the porphyry copper region do not necessarily contain epithermal type high-grade gold deposit unless very different timing. and porphyry copper deposit formed from highly oxidized magmas, high-grade external type of deposits. That area must have underlying very thick sediments to make reduced state magmas, and the base metals are removed in the reduced magmas to form gold-only deposit. So therefore, different oxidation state of magmas leading to different behavior of copper and gold and different deposits. Thank you very much for listening, and with gratitude to Canada. Thank you.